Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. In this intimate and deeply moving documentary film, There Was Not, it follows 4 women living in the Republic of Artsakh, an unrecognized country reckoning with the aftermath of one war while in the precipice of another. In the midst of this uncertainty, 4 women build a life with hope of making their home a better place. When a war breaks out, what began as an observational meditation on women's roles after conflict becomes an urgent and intimate record of their lives interrupted once again by the prospect and reality of war. We're joined today by the director of this brilliant film, There Was Not, Emily Mkrtichian. Emily, welcome to Cinemophile.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you.
Thank you. I consider myself an educated man. I take particular interest in politics and world history. And first of all, I did not know about the Republic of Artsakh. And then the second part is I was aware of the history of warfare between Azerbaijan and Armenia, this kind of back and forth, and the history of Armenia, but I had no idea about this. So thank you for that part of what I have learned. I think it's a fair way to put this, and that is you were following these women prior to the events that we see unfold in the film. So let's start at the beginning. Well, what put you onto these particular women? Why document what they're doing, what their lives are like, and go from there?
I lived in Armenia for a number of years and had traveled to Artsakh several times. Really, the place kind of captured my imagination in a lot of ways. First of all, it's just beautiful. It's a mountainous area and it's just surrounded by these gorgeous peaks and big, lush forests. And there was something about the people that I met there, and especially the women that I met there, that it just really captured my imagination in a unique way. I'm a descendant of genocide survivors, of people who have been displaced from their land. And there was something about the way the people in this place were so deeply connected to their home and to this land that I envied.
In the beginning of the film, exactly what you're saying. You can see why you would feel that way. They have I'll call it idyllic kind of lifestyle. They go to the marketplace, these beautiful surrounding countryside. There's a strong sense of community and a family. They seem to be genuinely happy people.
There was just this innate connection to land and nature and community that I thought was so strong here. And in some ways, as someone, again, displaced, I feel that lack in my own life. But the other side of that is that there are pieces of their life there that were idyllic, and there were pieces that were defined by the aftermath of conflict. And so I was also really interested in the contrast there, especially for women living in a post-conflict community, post-conflict society, in an unrecognized territory, what that meant for what freedoms they could actually have and the ways that they were fighting for a better future.
Yeah, I want to explore that a little bit because as I learned in the film about Artsakh, is that it unrecognized. I don't know what that means in terms of geopolitical kinds of considerations, but this is essentially in between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And it's been a disputed territory, as there are other places in that region that are disputed between these two countries. So, what level of governance? How did that sort of work in trade? What does that look like to be an unrecognized country?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty specific phenomenon that has come kind of after the colonial drawing of borders that
Hmm.
happened around the beginning of the 20th century. So one of the versions of that was the Soviet Union, where countries were given new borders based on ethnicity. There's a really specific legacy under Stalin, where he had a policy of kind of divide and conquer, where there would be these autonomous oblasts during the Soviet system. And they were enclaves of one ethnicity, but placed inside the borders of another ethnicity's country. And under the Soviet Union, under this idea of like, we are all one country, there was motivation and kind of top-down law that these people must get along, and there was no territorial disputes. But of course, when the Soviet Union fell, all of these autonomous oblasts became areas of big conflict, like we saw in the former Yugoslavia, for example. This Artsakh is an example of a ethnically Armenian enclave
Gotcha.
that was drawn inside the borders of Azerbaijan, and that fell into conflict when the Soviet Union fell.
Well, let's focus on the four women that the film is basically about their lives.
Yeah, so Sose Balasanyan, Gaine Hambartunyan, Siranush Sargsyan, and Svetlana Harutyunyan are the four characters in the film. And I encountered these four women in a few different ways. For the most part, it was friends of friends doing introductions for me. So Gaine and Siranush were both connected. I was connected to them through a mutual acquaintance. I was spending a lot of time in Artsakh. I was looking to have conversations with women who were kind of really embedded in their communities and fighting for a better future in different ways. And various friends of mine were like, "Oh, you have to meet Siranush. You have to meet Gaine." And Sveta, I met actually because in 2016, I was making a short film about the first group of women, deminers, so landmine removers, who were allowed to go out in the field and basically work in these former landmines and find and disarm these mines. And Sveta was part of that first team. And so that's how I met her. And then Sose, I was teaching, actually, one summer, I was teaching a month-long course at kind of like a technology high school, like an arts and technology high school in the capital city about filmmaking. And I had a group of young women in the class, high school women who wanted to make a film about Sose. They were like, "Oh, we know this person. She's in our community. She's so interesting. She does judo, but she's like on social media and we really want to meet her." And so we like went to meet her and make a little film about her. And I was like, oh my gosh, like if you've seen the film, you'll know Sose is like meant to be in a film. She is a character. So
Yes, you're absolutely right. They're all very compelling. And I think Gyan and Siranush are the two that are most, yeah, as you said, described it as kind of involved in their communities. Siranush is running for office in town, and also Gyan is deeply involved in a women's center where a lot of trauma is being discussed, a lot of things that are coming up in the lives of these women. And yeah, they're very compelling and just so yes, definitely. But also, I was really drawn to Savetta because of her. God, she's just so out. She's so direct. She's well, all of them are pretty direct. That's not that all of them are, but she just has this directness and vulnerability. The combination of those two things are really something. They're all great. I was glad to get to know all of them and in their own ways, but. Yeah, she is just so I just the determination on the part of all of them, but boy, she certainly and also, yes, so say she is to be in the sport that she's involved with, to be able to do what you do and then become part of the armed forces. My God. I mean, so anyway, I'm just waxing poetically here about all I want to talk about them all, but I also want to go back to how you layer their stories together to tell this bigger picture. And I think that for me is the strength of the film, to be able to kind of see how they interact, how they come into each other's lives and out in their own. So I don't even know if I have a great question here except to say thank you for that. But let's talk about the way you put this film, the story together and what your intentions were in that.
one of the most difficult parts of making this film was essentially there's a huge rupture in the middle of it. And every type of storyline that I was following with these four women, which is to say, the events of their lives, are completely disrupted and derailed. It was very challenging to try to tell a cohesive story when essentially everything that you've been following and planning for kind of disappears into thin air. And that really mirrored in reality what happened to all four of these women. They all existed in a world that they were identified with, that they were at home in, that they were working towards certain goals. And when the war started in 2020, all of that just became irrelevant. And eventually it all disappeared.
Yeah.
Layering their four stories and also dealing with this kind of rupture that happens partway through the film was extremely challenging in the edit. And I was really lucky to be working with Alexandria Bombach. And both of us felt really committed to the idea that the best way to represent the story was to be very honest and authentic about it and to really commit to it not being just a story about war, but it really being a story about four women in this place and their power and their resilience. Because I think oftentimes when the central plot of a film is centered on this idea of war or conflict, then the people in that film turn into victims asking for empathy. And it was really important to me and to the creative team that what we were watching was actually four complex humans struggling for something in the most unimaginable circumstance and continuing to wake up every morning and live their lives. And the quiet poetics and power in that is really what drives the film.
And until you watch this film, there was not. It's hard to imagine not only the disruption of a war and a society in turmoil, but it's also that your country, the place that you've grown up, the place that you love, the people you have been with, suddenly it goes away. The idea of you even being able to stay in the place becomes untenable for a lot of reasons, including the troubled, and that's an understatement, relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And Turkey is also, we find out, is involved in what what is happening as well, which was the perpetrator of a genocide against the Armenian people. So it's not, it is the war, it is all of, but it's kind of a whole nother level of horror. And maybe one level of horror doesn't matter if there's another level, but at some point, all of these things are soul crushing to imagine to have to live through, or to be able
Mm.
to live through. Am I getting any of that wrong, or how do you?
Yeah. No, yeah, I really agree. And I think part of the making of this film was creating a frame for it that kind of explained the historical nature of what was happening and also the only power that sometimes we feel we have in the face of it. So I grew up on stories of the 1915 genocide from my grandmothers, from my aunts, and I always felt like it was this thing of the past, that kind of crisis and horror was something that could never revisit us, even though the kind of generational narrative is like, be careful, watch out, be cautious, I think as a first generation American, as like a person in this diaspora, you kind of are taught to live a cautious life. And there was something about the way that I started making this film that refused to believe that. It wanted, I wanted to look forward to the future. And then when the war happened, yeah, I felt all of this kind of generational wisdom inside myself that had been passed on through the stories of my grandmothers and my aunts. And I feel like it became kind of an internal guide for me, and it allowed me to stay in that place with a camera in my hand, stay in relationship to those four women. And so the film kind of begins with an ode to storytelling and these stories that I grew up on as a way to kind of give some context or an entry point. And as my way of a filmmaker is trying to make sense of the things that I had seen and the idea of representing it again and telling the story of it.
Yeah, and by the way, the title there was not is apparently is that traditional opening to a story told in Armenia?
Yeah. Yeah, so Linuma Chilinum is like our version of Once Upon a Time. And so that
Right.
means there was not. And it's the same in Arabic, it's the same in Persian, and I think it's this really beautiful nod to how our cultures really understand the tenuousness of life and connection to land and the stories we tell as something that may or may not have been.
But it's stories that that inform our lives. They give us comfort. They point to things that we need to be concerned about. It is what it's humans. We exist to tell stories to pass on
Yes.
to others among us. And when you start to let this film kind of sink in through the lives of these four women, it's a profound sense to understand the depth and breadth of what is possible in life. And they embody that. They embody the giving of life to the taking of life to all of the things that come between those two markers in all of our lives. And I was really moved. I was really truly moved by their stories, but also this
Mm-hmm.
greater context you provide. Because frankly, in the world we're entering into with the mass migration on the what seems like on the horizon, this level of displacement and this level of being unmoored from our lives that we've known is not that far removed from what we could be facing in the not too distant future as a species. And I maybe I'm being too grandiose here, but that's how it feels to me.
I think that's why it was important for me to ground this film and the stories of these four women in integrity and authority, because I didn't want it to be a film that we were watching and we feel sad, or
Right.
the immediate goal is just sympathy for them, because I think they have so much to teach us.
Yeah.
Their dignity in the face of what happened to them and their resilience and their power is something that we can learn from every day as we get closer and closer to a reality that feels unimaginable.
Yeah, I think we all should pay attention for a lot
Yeah.
of reasons to these kinds of stories. And I just read this fairly recently. The history of humans is the history of migration, or the other way around. The history of migration is the history of humans. And
Mm,
we are destined to wander the earth in tribes, hopefully as an understanding of our humanity in all of us. But these are the kind of things that are as old as we are and will continue with us until we're no longer here. So I just think that that gives this film, again, as I said, a sort of a sense of the profound and a feeling of the profound. So I'm glad that I got a chance to spend time with all of them, and I'm glad. And again, for people who don't know, this region of the world is, by some accounts, the birthplace of civilization, and it's going through tremendous amount of upheaval right now. And I think that should be a sign to all of us. We better do better.
I have so much sadness about what is happening in this region right now and the types of inhumanities that people are facing. And I think oftentimes we feel so helpless. I can say absolutely in the face of what I've seen and experienced. I felt so much helplessness. And I think that, yeah, making art, telling stories is the only thing I know to turn to. And I know that it's profoundly bonded me to the lives of these four women for the rest of our lives. And that in itself feels like a radical act of love in the face of just so much injustice. So if anything, if anything, there's that. And I think it really helps us right now to be able to witness these stories, to make them, to witness them, to be in conversation about them. And so I really appreciate you watching the film and having this conversation with me. And
Yeah.
I really take your reflections to heart, and I think they're very beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the reception of the film has been tremendous. And I'm curious as to the reception among some of the participants in the film, how they come away from seeing what you've done here in terms of their lives, and hopefully as a way to teach people, as a way to be a source of comfort, I hope, for them as well. How have they reacted?
Yeah. It's been different for every person because I think everyone has had a different reaction to what happened to them.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
every woman has seen the film. The first person I showed was Sose, and Sose and I, we have several times watched the first 40 minutes of the film, because the first 40 minutes of the film is really an ode to that place. And so for both of us, it feels like a way to remember together what it really felt like to be there. And I think that is really important and special. So Sira Anoush has, in the years since the war and the ethnic cleansing, she's become a journalist, and she's become a huge activist on like for the displaced people of Artsakh. And so we're opening theatrically in New York, October 10th, and then Los Angeles on October 17th. And for that opening weekend in Los Angeles, Sarah Nush will be with me and doing some Q&As. And she's been doing some talks and some interviews on behalf of the film. And I think hopefully she sees it as a tool to kind of complement her activism and a way to kind of communicate to people what happened, because having that documentation is really helpful. And then Guyane has been using it to screen with displaced women from Artsakh in Armenia as a way to like hold events, to be in conversation, to have kind of a moment of catharsis together, and for them also to use it as a tool for memory. So yeah, I think everyone's kind of reacted in different ways, but it's been a an honor to be able to share this work with them.
Thank you to our guest today, the director of There Was Not, Emily Mkrtichian. Thank you for spending some time with us here on Cinemaphile.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was really a pleasure to chat with you.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.